Now, AI is able to just take the video, change the actor's mouth, taking
Yeah.
out swear words, changing the context. So I really don't know how long Hollywood's even going to last.
It's really going to reshape how we engage with search.
I mean, there's probably going to be new stars that are AI-driven stars that are not real people.
Like, what is the space that humans are going to be left that isn't going to be like just AI taking over there? And he was like, okay, there is this sort of uniquely human emergence of imperfect creation. It's the space of fast following that's going to be completely saturated because of how easy it'll be to follow.
They're going to
And
regulate it. I mean, they're going to, because somebody is going to do something nefarious. They're going to step in. They're going to use it in some way where they're going to create something that is going to harm people. And once it harms people, then they're going to say, whoa, 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 we need to take a step back. You're not allowed to use it that way anymore.
Unfiltered with Matt Farnsworth.
What's the role? What's the function? Who should be the gut check here? But yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be the new, onboard. It's going to be everything. It's going to be, you land on the website. Who are you talking to? You're talking to this chatbot.
More and more so.
Business. Yeah. You're still going to need the VSL. You're still going to need to show a webinar, but
For sure, on the sales side.
But you're going to have that chatbot down below going, okay, I can answer all your questions. You want to buy now? I can walk you through the process.
And I've been super impressed with if you structure the data appropriately, it's actually, I mean, all of these models just keep on getting better, and it's like it's exponential growth. It's not linear growth, which there's not a lot of things in our world and even in our lifetime that we have that kind of a expectation of growth about. Like, because you think even on the technology side of it, like we laugh now, but it's like iPhones. You're like, oh, it's kind of like last year, but a little bit thinner. And usually they're pushing to like their processing power. So they say it's like it's so much faster, but you get to, you're like, is it really that much faster? I think you're having it lift heavier weight, so the processing is exponential growth, but it doesn't feel like it is. In the AI world, it's just freaking insane to think about 18 months ago versus today on both sides, like efficiency and effectiveness. Like,
well, you look at movies. I used to make movies, right? And so when you have an actor and you need to change the dialogue, they can do that now without bringing an actor in, taking them into a studio, sitting them down, having them record ADR. That doesn't happen anymore. Now,
that's crazy.
AI is able to just take the video right here in front of you and change the actor's mouth, change the actors, what they're saying, taking out swear words, changing the context. So I really don't know how long Hollywood's even going to last. I mean, there's probably going to be new stars that are AI-driven stars that we see that are not real people.
It's weird, but like this is totally where it's going. And you see this in a couple of different expressions already. I would say that it's popularized in our sort of like faceless channels, faceless media.
Yeah.
And that's, proof in can you garner attention without necessarily having a specific attractive character. And it's one step removed from like, now you're getting, like this is the AI generated music. I don't know if you've seen what's going on with like purely AI generated music. And sometimes you're like, it's like B is where it's like in that zone of like, oh, this is B, maybe B plus.
Yeah,
I do
it's
think
good for real.
I had a I'm blanking on how to pronounce his last name, but it was it's Mark. I think it's Mark DeGrasse. He was the president of Digital Marketer. We had him talking to a small crew, and he's talking about what is the space that humans are going to be left that isn't going to be like just AI taking over there. And he was like, okay, there is this sort of uniquely human emergence of imperfect creation, which is so interesting, where like AI is really great at pattern. It like just pattern identification and sort of mimicking is really what it does. So for so many tasks, that's what you want. You want predictable success.
Model. It's not.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Not a soul.
That's exactly right. It's a learning model. It's not a creating model. And so you're still going to have these certain things where humans still have the opportunity in this space to break out, because you're literally breaking the mold. It's defined in going where someone else hasn't gone before. And so I just think it will be really dramatic, because now as soon as that's identified as popular, AI will be the fast follower. I actually think it's the space of fast following that's going to be completely saturated because of how easy it'll be to follow.
That makes a lot of sense. And in the industry I'm in finance, which is so strange that I'm in finance, it always kind of baffles me. I say I'm in finance. Nobody uses it. I mean, they do, but they don't. Like the outsiders use it. The people
Yeah.
who are the freelancers who are working to gain the business of the people that are at the corporations. The people inside the corporation, I mean, it's like, that business it really hasn't caught up. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not yet mainstream.
no, not yet. But to you and I, it's like every day. Like when it came out in July of, I forget, a couple of years ago, I was like, I'm in it. Like I'm on it. Like that day, trying to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Well, this is the typical adoption curve, right? Between your early adopters, your like bleeding edge, the people who just like we're here for it, and it's usually in certain industries where you have everyone's own version of that. AI, I think, was especially adopted in anyone in sort of like the copywriting space and the marketing space. If you're dealing with writing, because that was its first iteration on, it was a language model, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and I would actually say even, but yeah, it was just it was probably the marketer minded folks first, because part of marketing's effectiveness is its uniqueness. So we're constantly always chasing the bleeding edge. We're always looking for the pattern interrupt. And so it's like once it gets to like mass adoption, in a sense, you're like, it's already lost its edge. It's lost its sharpness a bit because you're constantly looking for that pattern interrupt. And so it makes sense where the marketer heavy industries or marketers in general kind of champion um, the innovation. They're also categorically a little bit more pushing the boundaries of legality because usually leading the regulation. Right? It
Yeah,
happens too. It's like, hey, when it's incredibly effective, usually what happens is it's incredibly effective and there's a chance that someone's going to manipulate that effectiveness in a, deemed
mm-hmm.
market unsafe way, and then regulation comes behind it. And so marketers have already been conditioned to lean in a little bit faster and a little bit heavier on the pedal when it works, because you're like, this may not be allowed to work forever.
They're going to
And I
regulate it. I mean, they're going to, because
yeah,
somebody is going to do something nefarious. They're going to step in. They're going to use it in some way where they're going to create something that is going to harm people. And once it harms people, then they're going to say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! We need to take a step back. You're not allowed to use it that way anymore." And for me, I'm a creative guy, and so it was organizational for me.
mm-hmm.
Organizing. It was fantastic. I was like, "This is like my partner here.
it,
This is everything. This has helped me create businesses. I mean, things that I
it
could never do before because I didn't have the analytical mind. And
it is really an amplifier. I'm
it is.
surprised. I still use it. I don't even use it as often as I should. I'm kind of really excited about the new version of iOS. I know some people are hesitant about it, but I'm like, man, you make it even more accessible, and I think we'll get even better at the tools, or just use it more often. But one, this is in the last few months, I realized, what was I stuck with? I was like, I had to make dinner. There was limited ingredients, and my wife was like, make something the kids will like. And I literally went to like on my phone, ChatGPT of
Yep.
like, here's what I got. I need something kid friendly. Boom, go.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an absolute slam dunk. And it was, I mean, not, it was a little bit comical to me of how much it made me look good. And I'm like, my secret was I just posed the problem to a large language model and it came up with a pretty darn good solution. And it's in like how conversational too. It's like, here's the ingredients, walk me through it. It's like, what appliances do you have? I'm like, here's the appliances I have. And it's like, here's a great recipe. And I was like, can you make it, I forget what they said. I was like, can you make it more kid friendly? And they're like, boom, here you go. And I followed the instructions and my wife was amazed.
Yep.
And
My wife is tripping on it. I got her going. I'm like, just use ChatGPT. Just go in, use it. Stop Googling it. I'll give you the upgrade. You can go in and you can look at some of the custom GPTs for cooking, whatever it is you like. And she's
yeah,
just like, she's in it constantly. And I won't put this on there, but she's trying to answer a text from her mom, and her mom is just, having trouble with something. And she's like, I use ChatGPT to answer my mom. I was
sometimes,
like,
but sometimes it's real. Like we used it.
mhm,
We were trying to figure out like a staycation
mhm.
for us, and I literally put in the parameters, and I was like, just give me some options. What's funny is, we know our core zones, but it was like to the point. I was like, this range of price per night. We want to have these amenities in, this sort of
No
like
way. It
how
does
far to
that
drive.
too.
And it literally, well, now with like the basically web access, it pulled the full list of all the like, here's here's my recommendations based on your parameters. And that's what we did. We picked from the list, and that's where we did our staycation. We did like a baby moon, but basically, didn't want to fly, wanted like, these sort of criteria there. And it was really, it's really going to reshape how we engage with search. This is actually interesting to see Google responding. They're already having to rethink them as a company. The majority of their fund, like how they afford to exist, is in search. It's something astronomical. Over 90% of Google's revenue is search based.
Yeah, but everybody's leaving. They're going to ChatGPT. I go to GPT first. Like I
No,
go there.
it's actually reshaping how people search and how people engage. So there was already a little bit of a movement with, younger generation searching more on social media. And now this is even affecting like a shift on, other generations, how they're searching and how they interact with it. I just saw WordPress, WordPress.com, the company, so Automatic, did a partnership with Perplexity, which is essentially another, I believe it's a LLM aggregator, but sort of like for AI. It's sort of like Wikipedia meets AI sort of thing. They're just trying to change the way people search, similar sort of thing, but they are not. They don't have their own large language model. They just connect with all the large language models and let you kind of go that way. And they're partnering with WordPress. And so now, because WordPress powers the majority of blogs on the internet, things like we're talking news outlets and like the majority of searchable information on the internet is actually powered by WordPress. And WordPress has got this partnership with Perplexity, which just really gives them a easier
access to all that information,
access to all the models. And in this pursuit of like, what is the future of content going to be? And it's going to be largely AI driven in terms of, aggregating and analyzing and even now writing it. And so all of this working into play is really hard to comprehend. Little bit hard to comprehend, because it feels like these are such pillars in our like digital ecosystem that I would have never imagined disruption. I still trust, Google is solidified to the point where they will continue to innovate and find a way, right?
They're a big enough company, but
they're a big enough company. And so even though the majority is search, I actually think what we'll see is I wouldn't be surprised if there's another big Google acquisition in the social space.
I could see that.
They haven't been able to do. They tried. What do they call it now? It was like Google Plus. I don't remember Google Plus. That's what it was. It was Google Plus. They tried their hand at like social media, sort of.
I remember.
Yeah, like a social network, and it absolutely failed. And their most successful is YouTube. In a sense, it's really a search engine, but there's a social component to it, right? Where there's a network effect. The more media that's there, the more people, engage with it. And it's definitely a dominant place for consumption. Actually, I saw this is interesting too. YouTube consumption, minutes consumed, it beat like all the other top 10 platforms combined.
Yeah, I look at it. My wife and I look at it as we watch. I mean, I have I have the premium. I don't watch ads. I go on YouTube. I just started using it more. I've added like 600 people in like a month. Yeah. It's like, you start posting content that's valuable. You give people some content that's actually valuable, that helps them with something, and the algorithm does pick that up, and it does add subscribers, and I think they're pretty valuable.
Oh, for sure. But so it's interesting to think, AI disrupting all these things. Google's still sitting there with like, they dominate on search, and they also have, of the other social platforms, YouTube consumption hours beats out everybody else combined. That's TikTok, Meta, like all the other time in app is beat by YouTube.
My mind was blown. I just stopped. I was like, look, I've been trying Instagram. Like, I'll post and I get more people unfollowing me. Got like 10,000 followers. I used to have like 500,000 followers at one point on Twitter, and I just deleted. I got so sick of it.
Oh man.
Yeah, I know, right? I went crazy one year and I was like, I'm just done with this crap. And I don't know why I did that. But the fact is YouTube, it moves. Like you can see, you can feel it moving. Like the subscribers, you can tell that they really are pushing the content out. Instagram, not so much. It's a different vibe. It really is. Every one of these social media platforms has such a different frequency that YouTube to me is the stellar. It's the standout so far, and I've started to put more of my effort into just YouTube.
Well, I think it's true for a lot of content creators, and now this is like Meta's tried to raise the bar, because that's the other thing too, is because because Google is so good at monetizing, they're able to pass that along, and there are now folks where their entire profession is just YouTube, because they can make a living creating content and monetizing just within inside of Google's ecosystem. So, and you have that network effect. The more content, the better it is. The better the content, the more time you want to spend watching there. But
Yeah, and that's a tough one. Like personal branding then is still alive.
mhm.
That's where to me, it's like, okay, yeah, personal branding then it makes sense on YouTube. It really works.
It does. And I'm always, yeah. So now we've gotten full circle into mass
Dude,
disruption, Google, and like where I think Google's still
Well,
set, but I still won't be surprised if Google makes an acquisition in something or a partnership. Like they could do like a partnership there, but like I wouldn't be surprised if they picked up some smaller things that get traction. Like here's an example. Oh, actually, who owns it? Oh, this is what it is. Elon Musk with X owns Vine. Do you recall
like
Vine?
old school Vines. Oh yeah,
Vine was had been acquired by Twitter.
I remember
And
that.
so it was part of it's part of the package. It's part of the portfolio, like the domain, legacy servers, all that sort of stuff. Like they've got it. And so when he acquired X, he's holding that and like has the potential to launch Vine. It's so interesting because Vine pioneered short form video. Like they were, I forget the
I
original, it was like
remember it.
12-second video clips. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of like big short form video creators who actually had their breakout on Vine. Then Vine shut down, so they moved over to Instagram largely,
Mhm.
and kind of pioneered a lot of the content around like short form
I
and reels and
remember
stuff like
Vine.
that. So
I turned 49 next month. And I remember Vine. I think I was having kids at that time. My kids are a little bit
yeah.
older now. They're like 18 and 20, but I didn't have the first iPhone. Like I didn't,
Mm.
I was like in LA driving around, going to auditions, stopping at payphones and like picking up a payphone to like call my agent. Like that is how old I am,
Oh, funny.
And so I've seen this whole evolution happen. And I had one of the first iPhones. In fact, my dad worked at IBM when I was a kid, and he brought home one of the first word processors.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I got into this, like into computers. I've always been that kind of nerdy, like computer. I loved it. And so in this show, typically what I ask is I go deeper. I go like a little bit raw with everything. Like what I want to learn about is about you and your early life, your formative experiences that influenced you on this entrepreneurial journey you've been on.
Love it. Okay. Let's dive in then. So for
Mhm.
early life formative experiences, um, I I don't know how far back to go. So we'll go back to start. So a unique aspect of me growing up. So I was East County, San Diego. Neither of my parents are from San Diego. We had no family in San Diego. My mom is from Connecticut, so you got East Coast. My dad is from Canada. You got different country,
Okay.
and so it was just the nuclear family, which I think is actually kind of shaping. I realize now, now that I'm married and my wife, it's not been that experience. It's like generations all in the same, zip code,
Yeah.
and so that shapes things. Probably a lot of independence, actually. Like my parents were independent, and then they passed that on to us, and pros and cons. But if you look now, like all my like all my siblings are out of state. Like we all like and went to places where there's no family, and so we just didn't have a legacy of like you need to stay close by.
Yeah.
I realized also sometimes it was like a trap. We also didn't realize like the benefit of having grandparents and uncles and aunts in the same city, because we didn't have that, and so
Mhm.
we weren't necessarily. I realize now, it's like I didn't think it was a bad thing. I just didn't even know it was a good thing. And
Until
now
you
when I
have the
have kids,
kids, you
until you
don't
have the kids,
know
then you're like,
how
oh my
much work
goodness.
they are. I had the same thing. I lived in LA and we had kids, and I'll tell you what, it was work. My parents were in Seattle. I had no family near me. She had no family near us. They were in New Jersey, New York. It was like we were alone and we got this toddler, and you're like, there's nobody else, and you got to make enough money in
Yeah.
LA, in San Diego, where you're at when you're first having these kids, to put them in some kind of childcare to get any kind of relief. And so you got to make money, or you got to have family around.
It's so true. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, so this is, I guess I've realized now that was a shaping thing, probably more to the independence, the sense of autonomy, the sense of self-reliance, that was, not intentionally taught. It was just like, it was caught, I think, more so than taught. The entrepreneurial aspect, my dad, so my mom has been a nurse her entire life and career. She'll, and oh my gosh, for decades in the same hospital system down in San Diego called Scripps.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a drywaller
Mm-hmm.
growing up. So they're both union, like those are both union jobs. And so I didn't have like a model of entrepreneurship. I will say my dad shifted into being a real estate agent. So there's an undercurrent
Mm-hmm.
of, sort of at least I guess the sales skill side of it. And I'd say he's naturally gifted in that way. People connector and just understanding the aspect of sales, which is I need to understand what your priorities are and see if I can connect your priorities to a solution that I might have here. And so, still largely just observed. Here's some of the shaping things about it. Actually, it's interesting, and people would not guess this about me. I don't know if it's entrepreneurial, but it's definitely deep to my personality. Is my parents were both strong agnostics, I guess is as I put it. So
Mm-hmm.
the story, my mom was raised Catholic, burnt out, didn't want anything to do with it, went to San Diego. My dad was raised Pentecostal, but my grandfather was a con artist and was just a really bad man. And the con that he
Mm-hmm.
was running was a Pentecostal pastor. And so my dad was like,
Wow.
this is a scam.
Wow.
Literally, like, I'm seeing this is absolutely a scam. And so they both had that kind of like baggage. It was not important to us. I think the clincher was when they got married, they had me, and they were like, we should get him baptized. And so they went to the Catholic church, and
Mm-hmm.
my dad had been divorced. And so this is in the 80s, and whatever, the Catholic church they went to was like, hey, sorry, you've been divorced, so you can't be part of our church.
Wow.
And so my parents were like we
Yeah,
we tried, right? For some people, if they've got like that legacy of faith, they'll like come back to it. My parents was like, that was it. And so the interesting thing in the marked thing for me is I think I'm naturally a little rebellious. It was I look back, I'm like, this is so odd, but my act of rebellion was toward the church. I had, like, in my teenage angsty years, my parents were so anti-church that I was like, forget you, I'm going to church. It's just funny. And I've still been like shaped in so many ways where it's like, if my parents do it, I want to do the opposite. I like catch myself thinking that way. Like I so much of what was part of maybe my tradition, we didn't have like heavy traditions, but even that, it's like we had no traditions. We had very small things of holidays. So I'm like, I want to have tons of traditions. I want to have tons of family around. Like I want to, whatever it is. So
You grew up like
it's
me. You and
it's
I are
shaping.
so similar. My mother had a terrible situation with her father, who was a Mormon minister,
Mm.
not a good man. And she's turned off by the church. So, no, don't want it. My dad, pretty much agnostic. Mother was Christian. Father didn't care. But, I had this near-death experience 10 years ago now. And that's when I came to the church. I just couldn't stand it prior to that. I mean, it was in LA, which
Yeah.
is definitely the devil's playground. I mean, it is a crazy place up in Hollywood, but I vibe with everything you're saying. So your life is blessed in that way. That's what I'm hearing.
Oh, that's absolutely. It's so funny. I think so I guess my journey and my faith journey was largely out of rebellion. There's probably similar to you where it's like in adulthood, we're kind of ignorant to some of these things, but so you're coming at it with just the perspective that I take now is like, then this is a very, churchy phrase, I guess, is like judging a tree by its fruits. But it just is like, I'll look at habits, people, thing, whatever it is, ideologies. I'm like, I'm going to judge it more so on the grounds of like what comes out of that. I'm less critical of even understanding the why, and more so like, what is the fruit of this thing? It's like, you look at the tree and like, that's such an ugly tree. It's like, but if the fruit is good, you're like, I guess this is the tree that I want to keep. And so I've had like, here's a similar experience for me. I was this way with like acupuncture. Acupuncture to me feels like so woo-woo, but I'm gonna tell you, for me, it works. I love acupuncture.
Okay.
Like there's when I have like an injury or something like that, and I don't understand it. It feels like magic, but I'm like, I would tell everybody, and everybody is different, but like in that same way, it's like, this feels weird, like needles in you, and it feels so like pressure points and all this like Eastern medicine. But I'm like, but you guys, like I have like had serious pain. I went into acupuncture. I let them do crazy stuff to me, and I felt like undeniable crazy relief. So in that same way, I kind of put my faith in that kind of zone where it's like, I did not claim to understand it, but I'm like, I'm judging it based on like what was the output, and I can't help it but say like this was at least good for me, and dramatic, like I could go into all sorts of stuff, experiences on the other side of that. And it's weird because I sort of don't have the baggage that some people come with like church, and I get it, like there's broken. For me, I'm zooming out, I'm like, there's broken people everywhere. And I also have the perspective of like, let me tell you, I've seen broken people not in the church and broken people in the church. And I'm like, you should, or even this, the legacy from my grandfather, like I already had the lens of, I understand there's horrible people that operate under the guise of the church. So other people experiencing like, I was hurt. I was like, well, did he, like I've seen, I haven't seen personally, but had the stories and legacy of like sexual abuse for like, or like physical and sexual and like the worst forms of, human brokenness.
Yeah, they use God's word to harm people. It's incredible, the prosperity preachers that are out there. What we see, you and I can communicate on this level because the scales have sort of fallen away, obviously.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's neat to be able to talk to somebody in that way, because a lot of people, you cannot relate to them until you believe it and you feel it. You got the indwelling. Once that happens, it's like, okay, there's no denying.
Absolutely. So it's interesting because we're talking entrepreneurial journey, but for me, like those are big shaping things, even how I got into business, but also like that's another big area in my life that is sometimes unexpected for folks. And especially like being in, LA or SoCal, you're like, it's like I have friends who are like, I am, it's kind of like, I'm that woo woo acupuncture. I'm like, yeah, but I'm gonna be real. It works for me. So
it works.
Here's the other thing. Actually, this is a big shaping thing for me is my father, when he got into real estate, it was right before the kind of like downturn. And so there was
2007.
Well, so it's just before that, right? So I'm talking like, so 2003, 2004 were like incredible years. And it was a dramatic difference, right? From like working drywall. And so he retired my mom. He didn't, and also I'd say like from an education perspective, my mom, like he was such a hard worker, but he didn't finish high school. And, he went straight into working in high school in Canada, went straight and learned a craft. He just like literally apprentice, learned drywalling. And to this day, I think he is a master drywaller, but that was the path that he went. Work super hard, learn a skill, and just crush it. Some of the softer skills of like money management and just put in that category, money management, like spend less than you make, like it wasn't there. And so I think with like a lot of folks who go from not having to having, the experience was we spent it. And so I recall in my childhood, like 2 good years, spent it, and then things took a turn. In that time, my mom had stopped working. It put a ton of financial pressure on our family. And I saw legacies of, I think, his father come out. And this was actually like a shaping fear for me, is I had this fear. I actually didn't even reconcile this until probably into my mid-20s, but it was that if I ever ran out of money, I'd become the worst version of my father. is
Wow.
the limiting belief that I had. And so I saw this, and so some of those kind of like just brokenness for him, it was rage, blackout, alcoholism, and it created huge rift, parents separated. And so there was this crazy shift from like everything, at least on the surface, seemed like it was so good. I realized looking back, I think he wrestled with anger probably a lot of his life. Like I didn't put two and two together that there were, instances of punching holes through cabinets and stuff like that, even in childhood, but definitely under the financial stress and pressure, a turn to alcohol amplified that. And
alcohol amplifies everything. I mean, it is very common that alcohol is prevalent in 75% of all homicide cases. I mean, it's like at least 50%. It's crazy.
Yeah,
and so it amplifies everything.
This was part of I guess is part of the shaping there too. So for me, a little bit of like I want to do and I still love my parents, and they've matured and grown through and like made it through these seasons, and I've had reconciled. But like I turned 18, I was like, I'm gone, like I'm done. I never want to come back. I was carrying a lot of like I just wanted to leave.
So what happened there? Like you leave, you go to college. What do? Do you work jobs? How do you get to
I stay
become the
out.
guy who
That's
starts
so that was
HL Approachables?
yeah, that's true. So that self-reliance was like, I will do everything not to go home. That was it. Like, and that's absolutely. So I was taking jobs, traveling. I didn't go back. I mean, I would like come back for holidays, but it started this like really, I was only a couple hours away, but I may as well have been a plane
a million
flight away.
miles away.
Yeah, I really may as well have been a plane flight away, because it's like, the pressure was around certain holidays, and I you would have thought I was 3,000 miles away, and it's so hard to get the plane flight, but it's like, nah, that's 2-hour drive. So came up to LA, did my undergrad. I was graduating, and I actually got a job before I graduated, because I'm like, I'm not going home. So like anything. So I was already like all through college, I was working, I was side hustling. But there was a sense of which, okay, I'm going to like sign a lease. I should probably have like some stability. So I took a full-time job before I graduated. Like I literally started a full-time job. It was nothing remarkable, but I was like, I will do anything not to go back home. I kept that job for about 3 months, because I realized so I was in Malibu. I went to school at Pepperdine, and there was one marketing firm in the whole city. And I did a quick little hack. I was like, they charge 10 grand for a website. I was like, I would charge 5 grand for a website. And so I took a class in like 8th grade that was programming, and I loved it. And so I just kept it as like a hobby. I even considered, when I went to Pepperdine, I looked at their computer science program, but it was so old. It was just, no offense to them, they were not bleeding edge stuff.
No,
so they're like, they're doing like, in my mind, I was like, this is program, like this is not modern programming. And it was legacy programming, and it's not like a standout program for that. It's not known for that. So I just kept kind of like as a hobby. And for me, it matured into more of like front end, we call like front end development. So web-based stuff, some into like the iOS application development, largely into honestly, WordPress was kind of like became, when I started going like who needed help, they all wanted WordPress. And so it was for me, PHP, HTML, CSS, that was like the backbone, and JavaScript was like kind of the backbone of the stuff that I would build. And so that started me freelancing. And so I just started freelancing, building websites for people. My form of marketing was surfing and just rubbing shoulders with other folks in Malibu. And so we just started getting, I say we, at the point, it was just me. I started getting deals with folks I had no business getting deals with. And so, we did some pretty big health. It was usually in the health and wellness space, because these were the guys. Yeah, these were the guys who decided to live out there. They're surfing, they're longboarding, and
they're wealthy.
And they're wealthy. They're big brands, and they needed like a web guy. And so that was it. And I was splitting a condo with 3 or 4 other guys. I was getting my rent down to $600 a month, and that was utilities in. So I was like, rent, utilities, $600, and I Chipotle, burritos. That's like all I needed. And so just hustling. And so that was how it started. And then I did more than the big mile, like the marker for me was like 100K. Like that felt like, oh my gosh, if I could make 100K, I'd be the richest person in the world.
Mhm.
And at this point, none of my parents had ever, actually that's not true. My dad in those good years had like these over 100K. And I remember that was like this thing in my mind, like
Yeah.
that's success. But I was, so I remember pushing to that. And then I realized when I passed that marker, I was like, there's people I could hire in Oklahoma who would do all the amount of work that I'm doing for 35K a year. And that's literally how I went from like freelancer to agency is I was already super familiar with communicating online. And I can't remember what the original name was. It's escaping me, but the early version pre-Upwork, there was another company that evolved and got acquired by Upwork. And that was the one, this is 2012, 2013, when I started hiring like contractors and then was like, I'll try a full-time W-2 employee. And so that was, that's how we kind of grew up. And so for 4 years, we just did web dev and design. And so with like contractors and small team, we got plugged with some PR firms in LA. And so they would send us an relational once again. So it was like one brand that's doing this, they were going to the PR firm. They liked working with us. My standard was just like, do what we say we're going to do when we say we're going to do it. So I wasn't super fancy with it. I was like, no promises. I had no marketing prowess whatsoever. So I was like, not a good marketer. I was like, I will just do what you are asking for. And we were good at setting and beating expectations. I think that was one of like the early skills. I accidentally fell into it.
You got to be good at selling though.
You do.
Decent. I mean,
well, I'd say like we lived on our reputation. We were not actually great at selling. I look back at our sales process now and it was so still antiquated. Like we did I think now is like very soft, very big, long proposal. And I was good at identifying priorities, presenting solutions based on their priority. And so, and it incorporated everything. What was your budget? And based on your budget, we would say like, here's your platform. Here's your pros and cons of directions we want to take. So we took it very much so kind of like a mechanic. We're not very salesy. And this was also because it was so relationship driven. People were like, this is the guy, like go talk there. So I didn't have to. So we kind of lucked out. We also lucked out into Shopify. So because there was some e-com, and how Shopify worked back then is the developer program was like an affiliate program. You build the site as a developer and you'd be like, it goes live. You instantly got 20% recurring on whatever the site did. And we had a number that would go past. There was like an unlocked enterprise plan and they still passed on those commissions. And so all the while I'm building up this recurring affiliate commission on Shopify. So it was a magical season, but one of the
support in
shaping
there.
things.
I hear a lot of support. Like you were supporting these clients, you were providing what they needed and you were able to support it. Like, okay, I can get these things done. And you did it. And it sounds like you were providing a lot of support too. Like that, I'm hearing that, you know?
Yeah. I think there was, for me, I'm not a type A personality, but getting back to like that core fear, I tracked every dime in and out of my life. I still have from the time I was 18 on like Google spreadsheets. I have year by year, month by month spreadsheets of every income and expense.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where like I was doing it. I didn't realize why I was doing it. For me, it felt like this is the healthy practice. It's like you instinctually, you're like, why do you get a house? Because you're like, because it felt like the safe thing to do. This was for me like the safe thing to do, that I should just track everything that I did so that I always ensured that I was living on less than I was making. And so, here's the interesting thing. Well, accidentally smart, but here's one of those shaping things that happened. So I got married in 2014. 2015, we went to buy our first place. My wife and I both are excellent spenders. We've increased in that skill of spending as we grow up. But she was like, found the place that needed no work, but then we did all the work. So we're like, shopping, like, I want to make sure it's like it already looks good to go. And then you buy it and you're like, you know what? Let's just do this. And it's like, well, while we're doing this, let's do this. While we're doing this, let's do this. And the project ballooned. But I had gone 4 years with everything always up and to the right. Always up and to the right. So what was I expecting? Up and to the right. And for no reason, maybe because I was distracted, I don't know. The last 3 months of quarter four, this strange thing started happening where I'd have the same proposal process, go through it, and I'm like, this sounds great. We'll start in January. And these were bigger deals. So we'd gotten to the point where like sites for us could be, I mean, the biggest we ever did was like $300,000. But I think people are surprised and they're like, hey, we did websites, like a WordPress website for $300,000. And so the context there, Malibu, and also step one is what's your budget? And I just found this world of people, enterprise clients, they're like, oh, my budget's $150,000. I'm like, cool, we will fit that.
Yeah, we can do it.
We can do it. The bummer is I had inflated some expenses, namely team, that these are fixed hard costs. Use it or don't use it. Like they're on the team. And so
got to pay them.
And you're paid last. Learn. So is the owner. And so we got to this point by December, ran out of cash. And I had to go to my wife and be like, we don't have, this was in hindsight, it was so silly, but we just had to carry debt. I never carried debt. I never like paid a minimum on a credit. I was always like, just like deadbeat. But so luckily, we had like, we built up credit. So like, I wasn't like actually out of money and had to like choose between rent or not, but it was a point where I was like, we can't be deadbeats on the credit card. We have to like, let this balance carry over. That feeling, I felt like such a failure. I felt like like my worst fear come true. Like I ran out of money. Now I have to like live with this debt. And,
that's hard. That I felt, I mean, I can feel the pain right now. I think about it every day. Like, oh, what if I didn't have this job and my other businesses? And what if my main stipend, what if that stopped? Like, what if that stopped tomorrow? What if they're just like, okay, we don't need your services, go. Then what? Then you're out hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're like, oh, how do I make that up? Which is why I ended up connecting with you, but that's another story.
Yeah. So it was very embarrassing. It was shameful. Like I look back and it feels silly, but in the moment it was the most devastating thing because I also, let's say like in November, so we're going through the holidays and I'm kind of suffering in silence. Like I was not brave enough to tell Erica that it was heading in the wrong direction. I'm kind of the natural optimist, and everything had led me to believe it was going to turn around. Like I had all the same pace of conversation, same pace of lead flow. I just didn't expect, and there's no reason for it, but everyone was like, this is where I was bad at sales, but they were like, start in January. I would just be like, sounds good. I didn't say like, hey, if you start this year, make a deposit. Or I had no pressure sales process whatsoever. And so, so I kind of suffered in silence, feeling like the walls are crumbling around me. And I remember going to my wife, and it was scary for her, and it was just shameful for me. And so the switch that flipped is I said, I need to be providing something that people want to start yesterday, not something that's like nice to have tomorrow. And so the quick Google search was like marketing. I have to learn marketing because it's not enough to be like a utility where it's like, oh, we'll get a new website eventually. I need to be the thing that brings them customers. They wanted that. So you want that ASAP. And that led me into the world of like, I need to learn marketing. And so I just Google University, fell into ClickFunnels, tried to learn. I bought everything that was possible. I did an MBA at UCLA. So I enrolled in their executive MBA program, which awesome school. Was that the best ROI? No, it was like $190,000 program that you're like,
yeah,
but I was just investing into myself as hard and as fast as I possibly could. I mean, and so I guess the other context there is the jobs did come in January. So like January hit and we're like, okay, we're back to like surviving. But now I was like, my game plan is changing. Like I'm not going to put myself in a position where that's going to happen. So learning marketing, we started doing deferred cash flow intentionally. So we started offering, we called them lease to own websites. So I do the same process and I would intentionally be like, that's your price. Actually, the cool thing is I could increase the price a little bit, divide it by 24 and say, this is all it is to get started. And you're just paying the same rate for the next 2 years. And you've got us taking care of hosting. You've got us, if you need anything. I already knew, like no one needs anything. And especially with stuff like Shopify, you're like the hosting's baked into Shopify. But anywho, it was like, you got us if you need us, but really it's a lease to own. After 2 years, you own it, you can be done with it, or we just refresh it again and start a new lease to own. And so focused on building that recurring income where I could anticipate, started to have like monthly recurring revenue and started to budget my life in a way where it was less than not what we took in that month, but what the MRR was. And so Yeah, group and marketing did deferred cash, like these intentional plays where I would rather take 1/24th of what we could charge to know for the next 23 months, I knew exactly what was coming in. And
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And isn't it interesting that this painful experience that you had led to something great, which happens often?
I mean, for most of us, that's like growth is painful.
It is.
And so that was a really marked moment. For the next 2-3 years, we just went deep into marketing. We evolved our offer into like performance-based marketing. So we would do rev shares with mostly California-based brick and mortar businesses that had the customer lifetime value to justify a percentage of first month value, if that makes sense. So let's say you're a chiropractor and you're saying lifetime value is $1,000, and the first month someone's going to spend $100 with you, and we'd say like, hey, we'll take care of everything, just pay us 50% of what they spend with you in the first month. And that was the
What
kind
are
of
you
deals.
taking care of for them?
Customer acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
any way possible. So that might be running paid ads, like go back in time, and there were situations where it was so cost effective that we could own the ad spend, and like the cost to acquire a customer was less than 50. And so at scale, if I could send them 100 new customers and it costs us $2,000 to fulfill, and they're paying us $5,000 for that process, like there's our margin of $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so those were the kind of things that we were doing. Best fit folks had maybe even a little bit higher first month value. And so then we're kind of like aligned with the business, trying to coach them on how to increase the value there. We would do, deposits, like collecting the cash before they even showed up. So doing some magical things in marketing, or felt magical to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it was mostly California, mostly brick and mortar. I say mostly, entirely brick and mortar.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good. We got up to like retainers. Our average monthly invoice was $8,000. And we had a couple of franchises, which are always good because it's like you sell once and you get 50 or 100 locations in one sweep there.
Yep, makes sense.
But the next shaping thing was in 2018. Shopify redrew the lines on their affiliate program, and like literally 1 month, all of a sudden, this was like, it's like $8,000 a month just disappeared, like just didn't come. And I was like, hey guys, I think there was some issue here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because for me, I was like, this is my retirement. This is like, to be honest, I hadn't done anything in Shopify for like years, right? So it's like, I was no longer in e-com. We were just brick and mortar, but I was like, and so what I realize is, companies, when they go public, affiliates are the first thing to cut out, like to reshape those deals. Cause they're like, why should we keep paying you for something you did, in 2012, or 2013?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
they cleaned house.
They cleaned it's somebody's like some VP of, growth got a raise because like, I have a great idea. Why don't we just stop paying all of these affiliates? And everyone's like,
is there something they checked at the beginning?
Amazing, yeah. Right? And then when when you're public, it's like we cast all the shareholders and they all voted and they said, screw the affiliates, and then we're like, they're like, really, guys? But I learned that's what happens. That's literally what happens time after time after time. In every single instance of a company going public, they will redraw the lines on affiliate terms because you're just no longer aligned, because they can. Because at that point, when you're public, you're so big that you don't need affiliates. So affiliates are great when you're young and growing, feels so good. So on the affiliate receipt side, here's what I was doing. Part of our stack for delivering marketing is we said to sign up for these other things. So I was kind of becoming a chunk of like my personal take was in affiliate marketing, almost accidental, right? So it was like, it was an afterthought. Like you need these tools anyways for us to do anything. It costs you nothing, but I get a kickback. And because they were all like recurring things, we even had instances where a client might come use us for 3 months and they'd get to capacity. They're like, thanks so much. We can no longer grow. This is the downside of brick and mortar versus like e-com. E-com, you can do marketing to, $1 billion, but like, your chiropractor is like, I'm good at a certain point. They're like, cool, I'm making $800K a year and I have no more capacity. Like, thank you so much. I'll just retain these customers now. We're good. And so, but what I found is they keep the systems, they keep the software. So they cancel us. And I was like, that's fair. It's, terms is how life goes. Keep the software. When this happened with Shopify, I was like, oh my gosh, it's all a scam. Like, and it's like, we need to build our own software. So we endeavored to build our own. We found a faster, easier way to do it. And we were just right time, right place. And so we plugged in and we're able to launch our own branded software. We kept it independent of our agency and did the same thing we were always doing. And so that was the next shaping moment, which was, I was already big on MRR, but now I was like, now we need to own the brands that we recommend, as opposed to recommending somebody else's brand. And it was kind of like moving to the space of like, what does it look like to deliver solutions with software as opposed to people. And so that was 2019. And from 2019 to the present, that's been our focus entirely is software driven solutions. And I'll say technically the next big shift for me as an entrepreneur was 2020, like a lot of folks, but the context for me was in 2019, my wife got pregnant. I was expecting my first son. Couldn't guess, like parenthood and fatherhood. It's a lot of baggage for me, right? And so there's a lot of expectation on me. I wanted, in my words, I called it disconnected revenue. So I built up revenue, leveraged with like the team. But when you've got $8,000, if a client's paying $8,000, if they're unhappy, like your day can be ruined. Like that's not an insignificant chunk of change.
That's a nice chunk of money, and
yeah, and so
you got to take care of them. You have to.
You do, and so so it felt like my time wasn't always my own, even if we were 10 people on the team, kind of a thing, and so we had we had felt like a good sized team, processes, stuff like that. But it still depended on me.
If you have a problem like that, your day is eaten up and you've got a new baby. So what do you do? How do you manage your time at this stage? I love the idea of the monthly recurring revenue and having clients at a lower level that you don't have to take care of like that. So,
well, and so that was so in 2019, and that was part of the motivation is I call it disconnected revenue. I wanted things that didn't have I launched it without my face behind it. And it was entirely tool based. So I was like, there are brands. I already saw there was a playbook to do this where they don't even need to know I exist, and it just does the solution. And you can think about this in so many ways. If you're like, who pick XYZ tool and let's go OpenAI. Like if you have a glitch in OpenAI, you're not calling up Sam Altman. That's not happening. So even if he has a personal brand behind it, but there's so many other tools that we use, and we're like, if this is, most folks don't even know the CEO or even the current president's Google. Some people don't. But if your Google Sheets aren't working, you're not like, let me get the CEO on the phone. You're just like, oh, it had a bug, it had a glitch, whatever it is, And so that's what we were pushing to do. And we did pretty well. So 2019, we pushed hard. My goal was 100K MRR and disconnected revenue. So I wanted to, we didn't get rid of the retainers because that was still good, but I was like, let me supplement. If I can get 100K per month, and you're like, Matt, why 100K per month? At this point, we didn't have a crazy mortgage. It was like 2K per month. We did not have that appetite of expenses. It was, in my mind, this was the size of my fear. That was actually the year where I realized that I had that belief that if I ever ran out of money, I'd become the worst version of my father. It was that. And I say it's like the bigger the bear, the faster you run. And so for me, that was the fear was so large. There was this dragon, and I need to build up a wall so high that there was no way that it was going to ever be a part of my life. And so that it was an insecurity that motivated me to be like, I need to have the moat so deep and so wide that I can sleep easy. And that was the number in my mind. So that was the push for it. 2020 hit. Our first child, my son, Kingston, was due April 24th. He came early. And so he came the week of COVID. We went in, I was laughing about toilet paper shortages in Target, and he came almost 7 weeks early. And ended up in Yeah, I know. Surprise. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I was to this day, I think it was traumatizing for my wife and I. From my perspective, we came into the hospital and it was like normal, but then COVID was announced that Monday, and the hospital didn't know what to do. So we're in California, and um, they started just emptying the hospital. Um, they started setting up like temporary beds and stuff like that, like in any empty space. Like they thought like the apocalypse was
Yeah,
going to
sure.
show up,
I
right?
remember. I was in California too.
Yeah, and so we went to the NICU. So he's born. He didn't have developed lungs. So we had to go to the NICU for, assisted for everything and tube feeds and all that sort of stuff. Um, the NICU, for folks who don't know, this is the neonatal intensive care unit. So babies,
Mm-hmm.
ICU, and it's a separate lockdown room inside of the hospital. Typically, you have 24/7 access to that room. So if your baby's in there, like you can be there always.
Yeah.
Well, they had protocols. So they kicked us out of the hospital,
Oh, I bet your
kept
wife
him
was
in the
so mad.
NICU, and they didn't have, now it's totally changed because so now they've got cameras in there now. So like we have friends who had to go through it posters, and now even if you aren't there now, they have the ability, you can watch your child at least. So there's no technology. So they have no technology. We're kicked out of the hospital. I was not prepared. That was not even on my radar for a challenge that I could possibly go through. Like I'm already working so hard to be a present and well providing father, and I had to leave the hospital without my son. That night, I just bawled. And uh yeah. So this was
Wow.
so at the same time, so here's what happened. So that's what I'm facing personally. So I bawled that night, but I was like, I'm the rebel, right? I was like, I can't help it. I still, in so many ways, you show me like a brick wall, I say you can't pass, I'm like, I'm building a hot air balloon, I'm just going over the wall, like I just don't even care.
Mm-hmm.
I devise a plan, and so I barely even slept. I just woke up early. I told my wife, I was like, I'm gonna be at the hospital all day. I don't know how, but I'm gonna be there. So I like literally packed a lunch, had a backpack. They told us when he was gonna be ready, he needed to bring a car seat. It's like, I'm gonna bring a car seat, black lunchbox, backpack. I'm just gonna walk into the ER because the front of the hospital, they're like, you can't get in. They actually do the checks there. I even thought, I was like, I'm gonna go at the guard shift. Like I know, because while we got to stay for the 2 days while it's like you're supposed to be there. And I was like, it's 6:30. They shift the guard at the ER, and I'm like, I'm going at 6:30, and that's what I did every single day. I showed up at 6:30. The guards are like dazed and confused. They didn't even have the protocol from the ER. I just say like, my son's in the NICU. That's all I would say. They validate like, yep, this name is there. They let you up. But there's like 2 degrees of security, if you will. There's like the hospital. Actually, there's 3. There's the hospital, then there's the baby, ward, and then there's the NICU. None of them talk to each other. And so I could get past the first 2 by saying, my kid's here. Like, this is my kid. I'm allowed to be here. But I couldn't get into the NICU. So I would just go to the waiting room that was closest to the NICU, and I would just live there. Like I was just there. Now, what I do, I was working. What work was I doing? Client calls of them canceling. And we did net 30 and net 60 terms on those performance deals, because when I struck them, I was like, let's be laissez-faire. And I was like, no one's going to bite the hand that feeds them. Guess what? In a pandemic, people, like, accounts payable goes out the window. So we had people canceling, not only canceling, but also be like, sometimes we had like, that's, I mean, the worst, someone was like, a $20,000-$30,000 invoice. Like that's what was due, because 2 months of work had already been done. And it might've been like $12,000 was what we're doing for some of these locations. And they're like, we can't pay it. And I was like, what do you mean can't pay it? Like the deal was, I put money in your pocket. You pay me a percentage of the money I put in your pocket. Like, and it was, so California shut down.
Yeah, use that upside down land to really stop paying people. People went into this hibernation mode. They kept all their money. They freaked out.
They did. So many business owners, they freaked out, especially if they were, people had to come in person. They couldn't go in there. And, we were, even though it was like California, like I never, we were still a mostly digital company. So it wasn't quite the shame. Also with COVID, like you couldn't even visit. So it was kind of like, what are you going to do? Like break the law and come find me. And so it was fight or flight. Like it was every single day I was reminded of like, why was I fighting for my son in the NICU that I can't even take out of the hospital? And here I'm dealing with clients. And so in that moment, the mantra was like, money doesn't disappear, just shifts. Just shifts.
Okay.
And we just got to put ourselves in the pathway of that money.
That flow. Mm-hmm.
And we had done stuff that worked. Like we had solutions, and I was like, okay, it's not working for us, but other states, other industries, like that was it. I just remember like, I just couldn't lose belief. Truly though, it was PPP and SBA loans that like saved us. Cause by like May, June, July, like if I look back, if there was not PPP money and SBA loans, I don't know what would have happened. Like I would have had to, maybe I'm sure I would have found a way, but actually here's what I didn't lay anybody off. So what would have happened was I would have laid off everybody. So like I would have, in effect reduced down to just the essentials. So I was fortunate that like nobody got laid off.
Wow.
We pivoted. We pivoted the offer. We spun up a couple different brands that were now able to serve other folks in other industries and other states that maybe were in a similar position to us. It killed me too. Like I saw it here. The interesting that would happen. Those same clients that stiffed us, they kept on paying for our software. So I had them as independent brands, and I was dying because I was like, I have your credit card in the Stripe account. I could just charge you and be like, surprise, sucker. You didn't know that I had the card on file over here. Like you thought I was, and they kept the software, the low ticket software that we had sold them. That was technically our brand.
They're using it.
They kept on using it too.
Of course they did. Yeah.
I was like, and, but the high ticket service, that was where like all of my costs were and like all of the liability was, they stiffed us over there. And so I just realized, two things. One, I was like, I am doubling down on more of this. Like even these clients that I've resented, I was like, they kept on paying for this thing, even in disaster mode, right? You're like, my goodness.
They need that.
They need it. It was essential. It was critical. It was like, they kept on paying their electrical bills. They kept on paying their water bills. And so, so we doubled down on growing that, and then also licensing out some of the solutions that we had. There were still good solutions. They just didn't work in California. And so, so we found a ton of possibility in certain industries like mortgage and real estate, where we weren't necessarily big into, but there were folks that were. And so we had some big accounts even come through in those spaces, because as people know, like what there were things that boomed in COVID, like home services. Everyone's redoing stuff, so putting so much money over there. Mortgage, the rates going down, refinancing, all that sort of stuff. So there were other spaces that had opportunities. E-com, my goodness, e-com boomed. No one can travel anywhere. So like,
that's the digital world, the ability to sell online blew up.
Yep. And so all of these other industries blew up, even though like our basis dried up and disappeared. And we were super fortunate that we just focused on putting ourselves in front of spaces that had opportunity there. And so, since that point, we've gone from, that was like 10 team members to now like 200. And so just kept on solving problems and, muscling through it. So that's a lot, but that's
no, wow. That's an incredible story. There's so much adversity. There's so many complications along the road to success, isn't there?
It's not linear. And I think there were, in those seasons where for me it felt linear, like it was always up and to the right, I was so immature. I just didn't even know. You know what I mean? It's like if everything, it's like moon gravity. Like if you lived on moon gravity, you'd be like, I'm so strong, I can lift cars. And then you get on like earth gravity and you're like, oh my goodness, cars weigh a ton, and you have no muscles because you had no tension to grow and mature under. And so I had it was a weird thing, but I had, a season of kind of like moon gravity where it was a combination of, I was accidentally, super frugal. I also didn't have a big appetite for stuff, you like your measure stuff and Chipotle burritos. And so it's easy to feel rich when you're like all in expenses are like $1,000.
Yeah. If you don't spend much, it's easy to feel like you got money.
Yeah. And
it's all
so
relative.
Yeah, it is. It totally is. And so it's so funny now too, like the, really actually, go back even now, it's like, man, I think that's wisdom I'd encourage that everybody, we try to challenge ourselves is how do we focus on profit first? I got the sign behind me, profit more, work less. Like what does that mean for me? There's an amazing book, Profit First is the name of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, there's actually two books that really shaped me. Profit First, Mike Michalowicz, and another book called Margin by Dr. Richard Swenson. The premise of Profit First is your business, most business owners manage by bank balance. It's just what we do. And so he says, instead of trying to like change how you're going to act, because you're going to do that anyways, why don't you just create a system that guarantees you're profitable? And so it almost feels like the Dave Ramsey method for like businesses, where Dave Ramsey, for like people trying to get out of debt, he's like, put your budget in an envelope and turn it into cash. And so what happens? You literally can't spend more than the cash in the envelope because there's no more cash in the envelope. And so what Profit First says is, he's like, instead of an envelope of cash, literally have like 5 bank accounts. And when money comes in, you immediately live by this percent is profit and it just gets transferred out. This percent is taxes that gets transferred out. And this percent is owner's comp and that gets transferred out. And so what you're left with for your OPEX, your bank account, your operating expenses, that's all you're allowed to see. And naturally what ends up happening is you're like, it's Parkinson's law. You'll expand to the space that you give it. And so anyway, that's a phenomenal book. I encourage anybody as a business to read, called Profit First. And if you want to dramatically change your experience, where now you can guarantee profits, and it's not rocket science. It's just, instead of trying to get you to be disciplined, he's like, don't be disciplined. Do the same thing you're always doing and just set a rule so it happens without you. And it's magical. And then Margin, the premise is that for the sake of progress, as we advance, that advancement kind of robs us of margin, not just financial. And so, and his premise is that marginless living is the root of all ailment. And this is just like a general practitioner doctor. Mm-hmm. And he was like, seeing patients coming in. And he kind of observed and derived that it was marginless living. And so the example, one of the classic examples is, look at time. 300 years ago, the busiest person had like one meeting a week, probably like sunrise, midday, or like evening, and evening was dangerous. So probably only like start of the day or middle of the day. And that was it. Why? Because transportation took longer to get there. Like scheduling, you like could either like, this was kind of your options.
A month in advance.
Yeah. It's like you're doing it a month in advance, and you're saying like you got like really 2 guaranteed times, because not even everyone had like a clock on them. So you're like, I know it's going to be sunrise.
Yeah, and it mattered. Like,
everyone sees that.
Very important appointment.
Oh yeah. And so you're setting one appointment a day, and weeks at a time. Now, so think about that. So like in that space, that's it. That's as busy as you can get. The busiest person has like a handful of meetings a month. We can schedule to the minute. We can connect instantaneously on video calls. And so what happens? We pack out our day. So for the sake of advancement, we rob ourselves of margin, which the definition of margin is the space that's accounted for. It is the unused space. And so he'd say the same thing, like financially now, by the advancement of debt and credit cards and the access to spending money you don't have, what are you able to do? It's easier than ever to rob yourself of any financial margin. Back 300 years ago, there was still debt, but it was very hard to get debt. And so it's like the chances you could be living in debt, very hard. It was like hard to do that. So naturally,
nobody wanted to let you, because if you went into debt with somebody, you could skip. You could go to some other place.
It was hard to enforce. Yeah, it was hard to enforce. So it was hard to happen. And so what happened? People naturally lived more within their means. Mm-hmm. If they harvested X amount, they like made sure they ate, they take care of the family, and then they got rid of the excess, or they would just plant and intentionally orient their lives in such a way that they had space. You just had to. It wasn't as easy to not have space. Now with the progress, it's very easy to live completely upside down and be like, I have no profit margin. I have no margin financially. And you just extend it out. I have no margin in my time. I have no emotional margin. I have no spiritual margin. I have no unaccounted for space, which turns out to be the richness of life is found in that unaccounted for space. And so, I mean, my little tangent of two books
That's
that have really
brilliant. No,
shaped
I
me,
love that. I
but
love that concept. I might pick that up and read that. That's very interesting.
both phenomenal reads. Profit First is more of like a tactical read. But I love those kind of, it's just heuristics. It's how we're wired. And when you align your structures with what you're going to do naturally, and then you get the results of it like accidentally, it feels magic. Like right now I'm standing on top of a treadmill. I changed my desk. I don't have a chair in my office, and I just have a treadmill permanently here. So if I'm standing at my desk, I'm on a treadmill.
Yep.
You know how much more likely I am to walk and get steps in every day?
Mm-hmm.
So much more likely. It's like I feel compelled to. I'm like, if I'm here and I'm standing, I should be walking. Normally, actually, this is a special set aside episode, but typically if I'm on a video call, I'm walking. And what did I do? I just hacked the convenience center in my brain that just said like, well, instead of putting all these barriers between me doing the thing that I wanted, I just made it almost inconvenient to not do what I wanted to do. So that's Profit First is that kind of a book, and Margin by Dr. Richard Swenson is just a mind expanding. For me, it was a paradigm shift in how I measure my week now is like my KPIs and success. I expanded them beyond just financial. So now I've got those. What does margin look like? Emotionally, spiritually, relationally, in my calendar. So all those sort of things.
And the benefit is obviously vast in terms of family, wife, happy life.
It feels, it's, I don't know if it's cliche or not, but it feels like a rich life. Like the more time that I have that's unaccounted for, the richer my life feels. And
I can't tell you how guilty I feel sometimes when I sit down and I get lost in some vortex where I know I'm wasting time on this particular endeavor, but I'm still doing it.
Well, sometimes pros or cons, but like I think there's a balance there of like having space for passions, like that's a great thing.
Oh, yeah.
And having space, but yeah, there's definitely like there's productive and unproductive space. But this is kind of like,
you're a passionate guy. You would go hard. So would I. And
yeah, we go hard in those things. But even like, so here's an example where it's like, is this wasted space or is this healthy margin? I've recently been on like a more of like a fitness journey, because that was one area in my life I identified I had not been prioritizing and had not found margin in, and kind of forsaken for all other areas. And I just budget. Like I love dessert, and so I have dessert every single night, and I've still been like crushing my fitness goals just because I budget for it. And so you'd say like, in a sense, like, oh, that can wasted calories, but you're like, no, but that's the richest in my life, right? So sometimes those things. So when you say the vortex, sometimes the space and the freedom to do it, where you feel like I mean, I guess it's a different thing. You feel like you're just like binging a TV show, but I think for some folks, if you've got the time and the space, and it feels like it's healthy and serving you,
yeah, you're paying for it beforehand,
I mean, you're budgeting for it. Like, this is for me, one of those vortex things is I still love programming. I actually still love writing code.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, if I had to pick a language that I just think it's my favorite language to write in, is actually CSS. And this is a styling code. There's been so much advancement now in what you can do. So I might put like JavaScript with CSS in there, but you can build pure digital experiences in CSS. And this is the kind of thing I go in. There's CodePen is this little like it's like a digital library you just like code in. And I've got an account in there, and that's like my guilty pleasure space where I make no money from doing this. This is not a productive endeavor in terms of my output. I'm probably not even like now on the team. I'm definitely not the best at it. I think sort of creative. So like maybe in some ways I feel like I have a more creative vision, but it's just for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just doing it because like I love the act of creating. For me, music's the same way too. It's like I play a couple instruments and I sit down and play. I'm not the best, but I enjoy it, and I love that act of creating. And it wouldn't be possible if I didn't budget space for that.
It's interesting that in all of this, we want control. We want control so bad, but we don't really have it. You know, that's what I kind of learned as I've gotten older. I've tried so hard to control so many things in my life. But when I do say, it's not really in my control at the end of the day, maybe I should relax about it, you know, and say a little prayer about that. That usually changes things for me dramatically, is giving up the wheel. Like, I really am not the one that is at the wheel right now steering this ship. I can sure be the best steward of all of the work that I do, but at the end of the day, is it really me?
So
That,
true.
you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of where
So,
I go
so good.
with everything. And yeah, man, it's been a pleasure to get to connect with you. So many things that I popped up that I never would have imagined. I'm sure I have 1,000 other questions for you, but maybe another time
Yeah.
we can sit down and connect on all these things. New child, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So this is expecting a girl, and this is our first. So we got two boys, and so we'll have a third is a girl, and it's every season for me of uh, anticipating another child has been super um, motivating. I don't know if it feels like I am most productive when my wife is pregnant, which is so weird to say, but like it's the season of anticipation. I do think this is the like um uh it's like sowing seeds versus like harvesting, and I go into create mode way harder in expectation too. I think it's also been in these seasons where the kids are a little bit, there's space there, so they're a little bit more mature, so they don't need me as much during the day, and so our cadences, I can have longer periods of like creating and doing. But so it's funny to look at, like to be expected.
Yeah, you're a father, and fathers want to provide for their kids. They want to do the best job. The good father says,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I take care of my kids the best that I can," and so that you work hard when you see that baby and you know that baby is growing, and you're like, "This is another responsibility. I want to take care of it." So good on you. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a fun season of anticipation, and it's also, this is like I feel like I get better every iteration of it, of the business, but also like even
Oh yeah.
with the kids. And so this is our first fall baby, and due date is actually Black Friday. And so
Mm.
in the marketing, we're like, this is like our this is the Super Bowl of seasons of all the things we orchestrate, because we do so much stuff in November and December.
Hmm.
And so, but now, because I know it's coming, every year it's coming, but when do I usually, like, at our best, when did we plan for it and build it out? Like in October.
Yeah.
We're doing it now. So like I'm like, by October, it'll be done, set, ready, like all in the pipeline, ready to go. So the cool thing about that too is all the ideas that you have that you wish you could have done, like whatever the extravagant best version that you thought you could have there, it's like now with so many months in advance, and I'm able to orient my schedule around like, hey, I'm just going to make sure that when I am actually less present, I will actually be more present. And so it will seem like I am publishing just fiend, and it will seem like we are creating every day, every week, and it's in preparation now, which is like, that's what happens in like those Super Bowl moments. In the best case of them, is like you're seeing the product of years of
Yeah.
preparation.
Yeah, you're like
And
you're setting up all the automation now. Content creation, have you been stockpiling? I mean, and do you have an editor that's jumping on that for you to put that out? And do you handle that yourself still? Just last questions. I'm
oh
curious
yeah,
about
yeah, that's
that.
great. So we definitely have team that are doing it.
Hmm.
I'm like, so much of marketing or the creative process, I appreciate different perspectives. And so we have a number of in-house folks. And then I also pretty regularly cycle through contractors, just to
To
enhance
create
the
content, like say reels, things like that.
perspectives. I
Hmm.
want other people's ideas.
Hmm.
Um, I want other people's ideas. So especially on the researching, ideation, and even scripting. So I
Hmm.
think, before we started talking, I was like doing some stuff that was like scripted, or at least prompted in terms of that. I'll regularly have multiple folks that are bringing so many ideas, because it is like in most creative endeavors, diversity is so critical, and it would just be not physically, it would not be fiscally responsible of us to like have, we're not big enough to be like, we've got 20 different creators who are all coming with their ideas. But like in bigger institutions, that's what they do. They just have enough folks. It's like script writers, right? You look at a show. One of my favorite shows is The Office, and they might have, well, they usually have like, let's say 5 staff, full-time writers, and another 10 in the wings kind of stuff. So you're like, wow, there's up to 15 people that are putting their ideas into one script. It's not just one person, sewing all the way through. It's like, yeah, no, it's the diversity of thought and ideation in that creative process really creates something rich there. So we try to do the same thing, even on the content side of it.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I move through a lot of different editors. Like I do some of it myself. Sometimes I'll pick it up and be like, okay, I'm going to edit this myself. I'm a video editor, so I can do it.
Yeah.
But I do like to work with different people because they bring different vibes, different feelings, and different energy to every video and every project you create. You could even keep a couple on staff, and just then you've got the diversity going out, and you're going to impact different audiences, and you're going to affect different people in different ways.
Yeah. I know it's unfiltered. Here's another tidbit. This is a new thing we're going into. Is I'm hiring we actually have we've got a really deep videography and editing team, because we had a branch that was doing just so much of it in-house, and also like, on some of the resources side of it, like we're pumping out videos on the daily, and they're not necessarily like media focused. They're not social media. They're not even YouTube. They're just like how-to videos in essence. Right. So we got like a lot going on there. I'm making my first hire of like a videographer to just do more vlog style content. So I'm trying to log in more, just a different perspective than this. Like this is the view that like most people get, because this is what's set up, and I can't follow myself around basically
to
like
more like behind the scenes, like a Gary Vee style.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So yeah, like a D-Rock is who I'm interviewing and trying to find somebody who's like, hey, you're actually just like, your full-time job is just to hang out with me on the daily and have it so I can be mic'd up and kind of catch. I've just noticed too, this has been an interesting challenge for me in growing in self discipline. It's been a marked thing of this year, is I realized the business can succeed because I'm pretty open-handed and can delegate, but there are areas of the business and my personal life that need just personal discipline. Fitness is one of those, right? Like I can't phone in being compliant to calories, or I can't phone in showing up at the gym. Like I just got to do it.
No, that's gonna take some time. You got to go do
it. Another thing has been more raw content. And so I don't even know if you follow me on Instagram, but if you like, I've upped my stories. So it's such a simple little thing. Just like, hey, just bring people into behind the scenes. And the discipline of, I post on average, let's say 5 stories a day, to just bring people behind the scenes of what's happening. And it's so well received. I get more views. This is like, it doesn't make sense to me, but it makes sense kind of with the content. I have most engagement on stories, probably because I personally do it. Everything else is kind of curated and professionalized and stuff like that.
I agree with you. Yeah, I've often thought of this as well. I watched Gary Vee grow. I watched that whole thing happen. And I always said, people, they care about what I'm doing behind the scenes. It's like, yeah, sure, I can tell them, here's how you sell a product. And they're like, okay, great. Can we see like you lifting weights? Can we see you hanging out with your wife? Can you talk about your sobriety some more? I mean, yeah, like, okay.
No, it's so true. This is the social aspect of social media. I realized I was phoning in. And so I did, like, this is another behind the scenes for any business owners of personal disciplines that I've just cultivated this year is DMing folks, cold DMing folks. Maybe I'd call it warm DMing folks, because here's what happens is I'll get followers or engagement of even like ads that we run. And so, but now I'm like, on any given day, there's hundreds of people that will like an ad, just because we run a lot of ad spend. But now I'll just personally be like, I'm going to make sure I personally DM them and I just, as many people as I can throughout the day that I work, to just engage socially, to be social on social media. Because it was one of those things for me. It was like, man, I needed to find areas to grow in personal discipline. And that was one of those. And it's been surprising. I mean, surprising, unsurprising, the effect of it. And, it's never going to amount to the reach we get in terms of paid advertising, but I more and more so I tell folks, like, it probably accounts for 30 minutes a day of my actual attention and time toward it. I can do it in batch. I actually have like a pre-def that I use on the phone. So you can like have, I forget if it's like translations or something in like an iPhone setting where I just type in HEYI a word I would never, it's a made up, I just like, hey, and it will pre-save out a statement that's usually like, hey, Matt, saw you pop up in my IG world. If you ever have any questions or need help with anything, XYZ related, absolutely reach out, thumbs up. And I intentionally have it saved and it misspells the word anything. And so like I am personally doing it, but also it's like it's misspelled, and I just like keep that as part of the cadence there. So trying to up the social component.
It makes them pay attention when you
media.
misspell it, by the way.
Oh yeah,
It's
that's
purposeful. I totally get it. I'm using ManyChat now, and I'm just like rocking out a few messages where I'll say, "Hey, type in the comment sober if you want to get me," and just instant DM. They get it instantly. It does work in stories. Like you get like 50 people just hit me with a DM, and they got an automatic message.
I've been surprised. So I just I had curated kind of like a stuff in my office. People ask me all the time, like, what's your setup? What do you got going on there? And so I just went on Amazon. I was like, I'm just going to make the, it's like they have a thing. You kind of make a Matt's favorite products or whatever it is. And but it's all affiliate links.
I have that. I have it. I have all the gear that I use to film in here is an affiliate link right now.
It's great. So I got this page of it. It's just on hand. And because of the stories, most of the stuff that I'm commonly walking, I mentioned I'm usually walking on the treadmill. I got asked so many times, what's the treadmill? What's the treadmill? So now I'll just regularly, like every other day, I'm like, hey, if you're curious, here's the link to the treadmill. And I can't tell you how much I've made in Amazon commissions for people buying the walking treadmill. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is why people do this as like a job. But I'm like, it's just, I didn't set out to do it. This wasn't like some master plan of how I was going to do it, but it's funny. The after effect of, you control your inputs, you can't control the outputs. And what I've always tried to focus on is the person that I'm becoming, and envisioning like who, when I imagine that person, what do they do to get there? And then you just kind of try to live in alignment with that. And so
I think a lot of people are afraid of like picking this up and just going, hey, how do you say your last name?
It's Deseno. It's like casino with a D.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like they're afraid to be like, yo, what's up? I'm on a podcast right now with Matt Deseno, HL Pro Tools. This has been a stellar podcast. You got to check it out. I'm going to drop it probably in a couple of days, so stay tuned. It's that easy.
It is that easy. Actually, I was gonna sometimes I'll do it after the show, but I can do it right now too. But like that's literally people are.
This is what we're talking about, is activation. Like, okay, activate what you're doing and do it. Don't just say, I'm going to do it. It's not that hard. Don't think too much.
It's so true. And this is, if anybody's starting out too, stories. I love stories because they disappear in 24 hours. So worst case scenario, you're like, it's a flop, it disappears. Whereas like reels, you feel like if it's a bad one, you like look at it and you're judged for it, like, time and time again. The story, you're right. It really doesn't matter at all. But if you need baby steps to get into it, stories disappear. So it's one of those things where you're like, it only lives for 24 hours. And so just working on the muscle of publishing is really
it's about growing your subscriber base, growing the followership. And then you can sell. You've got a base there. Like, I've got Unfiltered. There's thousands of downloads a month.
I'm here. We're doing the Unfiltered podcast, and I'll link to it down below. This episode is going to drop this week, next week.
Definitely soon. This week, end of the week.
Check it out.
Friday.
Matt's an awesome guy. And if you want to hear me on the podcast, I'll drop the link. There it is. That's simple.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, it's that easy. And so many people are like, that's hard. But and that's neat, man, that you're doing all that. And activation, just do it. It's not hard. We've got these 4K devices now. I tell the people in my business, just do it. Just, you're at a convention, just hook it up, say hello. Here we are. Behind the scenes is big.
It is. Yeah. Cool. Any other closing thoughts? Or we?
I mean, I think we covered so much good stuff.
We did. This is like,
and I'm sure you've got to get your day going here. What is it? You're like your night going. Was it 5 o'clock?
Yeah, it is. It is time. I probably got to call it, but.
All right, brother.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Seriously, send me the link when you got it. And
I will. We'll chop up. We're going to chop some stuff up. We'll have some reels and stuff, and I'll send you some cool stuff.
Yeah, that'll be great.
All right. Great to chat with you, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.